Okay, welcome to And Action Dashboard Appeal. I am so excited to talk to you this afternoon about creating interactive visualizations. There are a variety of tips, tricks, and techniques I'd like to share with you to make your dashboards come to life. Now, before we begin, I'd like to warn you that I'm not going to cover every topic exhaustively, and since I have so much that I want to share with you, I'm going to move quickly. It is totally okay if you miss some things. This talk is being recorded, and you'll be able to access that as well as the slides after the conference. And since I have a lot to cover, please save questions at the end, and hopefully we have a few minutes at the end. If not, feel free to come up after. So by throwing a lot at you, my hope is to introduce you to some new stuff and to inspire you. So before we dive in, my name is Jeff, and I've been at Tableau as a software engineer for over 3 years, working on teams that have thought a lot about selection, highlighting, filtering, and tooltips. And there are two things about me that I'd like to share with you first. First off, I love making and eating doughy creations. Of the 4 things listed up here, 2 of these are things that I made. And if you're wondering which 2 those are, the correct answer is that you can't tell because they all look so tasty. But in reality, they are the 2 on the left, the focaccia and the bagels. Also, I love celebrity encounters. Here are 6 people that I've come within 10 feet of in real life. We've got basketball player LeBron James, actress Emma Watson, documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock, poker player Daniel Negreanu, Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, and soccer star David Beckham. And I promised cameos in my talk description, so let's get the celebrity counter started. Okay, so of these 6, I got a chance to talk with 2 of them. And the 2 that I got a chance to talk with are Beckham and Negreanu. So if you have any tips or recommendations about doughy things, or if you happen to be a celebrity yourself, please come up after the talk and we can chat. Okay, if you enjoy this talk, please tell your friends. There will be a repeat session the final day of the conference at noon. And if you want to learn more about actions in Tableau or about dashboard design, there are a few sessions happening tomorrow that you may find interesting. There's 2 in the morning at 10:15, 1 on Tableau Actions, 1 on dazzling dashboards, and then another in the afternoon on effective visual design with your dashboards. Okay, here is my aggressive agenda, 9 different topics. And hopefully throughout the talk, these all pair well with each other. Okay. Throughout the talk, I'll be demoing pretty much everything I talk about in Tableau, and we're going to be using the same data set throughout the demo. So I want to introduce you to the data that we'll be looking at. Now tonight, just actually a couple blocks away, the Vegas Golden Knights will be playing their first ever home National Hockey League game. They are the latest expansion team and the first ever major professional sports team in Las Vegas. So I figured we could take a look at a data set about sports championships. Specifically, a data set that looks at which teams and metropolitan areas have won championships in baseball, basketball, hockey, and football. So we'll be able to answer certain questions like which metro has won the most championships, which metro has gone the longest without winning a championship, which metros win championships more often, and even like how do you classify a metro? So I work out of the Tableau office in California, in the Bay Area, and even in the Bay Area, what do we consider a metro? Is San Francisco separate from Oakland, and they should be kind of considered metros to themselves? Or is San Francisco plus Oakland the Bay Area? Or is San Francisco plus Oakland plus San Jose the entire Bay Area? So we'll see how that impacts our analysis as we move forward. Okay, let's begin with topic number 1, highlighting and legends. Let's increase our celebrity count with a cameo from the cast of Parks and Recreation, one of my favorite shows. So highlighting in Tableau looks a little bit like this. We've highlighted Aziz and dimmed out the rest of the visualization. So you can see Aziz in the context of his fellow cast members, but Aziz is highlighted. So you can use highlighting to see a subset of the data within the context of other data. In this case, we were able to see Aziz within the context of the rest of his castmates. With highlighting, you can search for data values with a new feature as of Tableau 10.0 that I'll show off. And you can use highlighting to see other marks that share the same values as your mark of interest. OK, so we're going to go over the following topics in Tableau itself. So I'll switch over to the Tableau view. OK, we're already able to answer our first question, which metro has won the most championships? That would be New York City with 49. Although I'll also point out that New York City has also lost the most championships. OK, let's select this mark here. And we can already see something happening in the visualization. We see that we've selected the winning mark, and so it gets a black border around it. But we also highlighted other parts of this visualization. So on the right-hand side, we've highlighted the lost mark, the yellow one. So all of the other marks are dimmed out, and just the selected mark and the highlighted mark show up. And on the left-hand side, we have this header label, New York City, that is highlighted with a yellow background, whereas none of the other headers have that background. So you can see the different types of highlighting visual treatment that Tableau provides. Let's switch to a different sheet here. This is a very similar viz as the one that I just showed. It's just showing the wins now per metro, not the losses. And we've broken it down by sport. So we put sport on the color shelf. So again, New York City's at the top. And it seems like they have a lot of baseball championships. OK, let's start playing around with this legend. If I start selecting an item in the legend, you can see that we've highlighted now all of the marks in the visualization that are baseball marks. And I can do the same thing for other items in the legend. So now I'm highlighting all of the baseball and basketball marks. So this is one way that you can do highlighting in Tableau. Now let's go over here, and I have this pill called Title Game Winner. Let's go in here and show the highlighter. This is new as of Tableau 10.0. So if I click into this highlighter, I'll see a whole list of championship teams. And if I start searching for some, let's say in Chicago, I start seeing all of my search results, and all of the Chicago marks in the visualization are now highlighted, and all the others are dimmed out. If I hover over some of these results, I can see the viz change to highlight the corresponding marks. So here we're highlighting all of the Chicago Bulls championships. And I can go back here and, again, go back to my view where all of the Chicago marks are highlighted. OK, let's take a look at another way that we can use highlighting. Up here in the toolbar, we have this highlighting pen icon. And the tooltip says highlight. If I click on it, then I get some fields down here, which I'm going to select sports. OK, now that I've done that, let me go over to this mark for the New York Yankees, select that. And this looks very similar to what we saw before, where we said that we want to highlight all marks that share the same sport as the ones that we've selected. So I've selected this baseball mark, and we've highlighted all the baseball marks. And notice, too, that in the legend, we've highlighted the legend item there and dimmed all the rest. I can go back up here and add more fields. So instead of just sport, I can say sports and metro. And now I've highlighted just the marks that have the same metro and the same sport, so all of the New York City baseball championships. And if we hover around, we can see that we have the New York Yankees. Oops, let me go back. The New York Yankees. We have the New York Mets. We have the New York Giants before they moved to San Francisco. And we have the Brooklyn Dodgers before they moved to Los Angeles. So a way to highlight other marks that are similar to your mark of interest. One final note is that you can use labeling very effectively with highlighting. So if I go to the label button here and click on it, I can show all mark labels, but that seems like a little too much for now. I want to just say that I want to highlight, or I just want to show the marks when they have been highlighted. So if I click that, and then go back in here and use the data highlighter and search for Chicago, then I can see that only the marks that are highlighted get labeled. OK. let's move on to topic number 2, tooltips. So when I think about tooltips, I like to think about Matt Damon, one of my favorite actors. Okay, so Matt Damon isn't really saying anything here. He's just a stagnant photo, but let's apply a tooltip to him. And if you've seen Good Will Hunting, then this should come as no surprise that Matt Damon is going to say, "How do you like them apples?" Okay, so tooltips are great for supplying more details on demand. At first, Matt Damon wasn't saying anything, but then as we started to play around with the visualization, he started to say something. So this is a great way to keep your dashboards and visualizations minimalistic. You don't have to show all of the data up front. You can disclose some of that progressively through the tooltip. And you can also use tooltips to easily see value differences between nearby marks. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the demo. OK, so we'll go into Tableau again and talk about formatting, using null values, responsive tooltips, and one of the most anticipated features this year, Viz in Tooltip, coming out in Tableau 10.5. OK, let's switch to this tooltip sheet. And this particular visualization is showing a mark for every year that this particular metro had a team in a professional sports league. Now, if the mark is colored gray, then that metro did not win a championship at all that year. And if the mark is colored red, then they did. And I've sorted this viz based on when the last time that this metro won a championship. How many years has it been? And so we can see from this, the poor San Diego has gone the longest without winning a championship. If I hover over this mark here, we can see that it's been 54 years since San Diego won a championship back in 1963. OK, so we have the tooltip set up here with some information. And we were able to tell with the tooltip that it was 1963 and 54 years ago. But this is just the default formatting that Tableau provides. I think we can do better. We can format it to make this data more obvious. So let's switch to this next sheet and hover over the same mark and see how much more this data comes to life. Now it really pops out that San Diego last won a championship 54 years ago. So to do some formatting, all you have to do is click into the tooltip button, and you get your standard formatting options here at the top. OK, I talked about one of the benefits of tooltips being that you can easily see value differences between nearby marks. So as I hover around in this visualization, we can see that the year is increasing as I hover closer to the present day. And if I switch between, say, San Diego and Buffalo, it's very easy to see the difference between San Diego and Buffalo, the difference between 54 years ago and 52 years ago. So what's nice about this is that we're keeping the tooltip in the same field of vision so that as you're switching between marks, you can easily see value differences between nearby marks. It's almost like there's a bit of an animation going on between the tooltips. OK, so as I've been hovering around, maybe you thought that there was something weird going on, which is that as soon as I hover over a gray mark, we see that there's a title game winner and a title game loser, but without any information. And that's because, like I said, the gray marks represent years that that metro did not win a championship, so we don't have any information for that. And that's OK, but it's a little bit weird to show a label for information that's just not there. Again, I think we can do better. So let's switch to this next sheet. And as I hover around, we can see that when we have information, we show it. And when we don't, the tooltip crops to not show that information. So how are we doing this? Let's go back to the previous sheet, look at the tooltip. You can see that we've supplied some text here so that on every tooltip, we have a title game winner and a title game loser, even if it evaluates to a null value and nothing shows. But here in this next sheet, if we look at the tooltip, I've had it set up so that there really is no text in there that always shows up. Everything is just a token, which represents a field in my data. And so what I've done here is I've set up calculations so that if there was a champion that year, we'll show information. If not, it'll be null. And by default, if there are null values, Tableau just won't show it in the tooltip at all. So this is a nice trick to not show extra information when you don't want to. And I'll just briefly show what one of those calculations looks like. If we go to Edit here, you can see that I've just set up a simple conditional. If the sum of 1 is greater than 0, aka if this metro won a championship, then we'll show this string, otherwise we won't, and Tableau won't provide any space for it in the tooltip. OK, so I think we're doing pretty good. In most cases, this tooltip looks pretty nice at this point. But let's scroll down to Boston and start hovering around here. And we can see the Boston won a championship in 2001. The Patriots won again in 2003. And then if we go to 2004 here, this looks a little funky. We have an asterisk beat the asterisk in 2004. So what is going on here? So what's happening here is that if there are multiple values for a certain mark, we'll just show an asterisk by default. And there are some ways around this. You can use some calculations to kind of get around this and show other values. But there's a better way as of Tableau 10.5. And I'd like to show you that way by using Viz and Tooltip. So let me go to this next sheet that has the same information, where if we hover on Boston in 2004, we see the asterisks. But now I'll go to the second sheet that shows a list of title games. This is all of the title games in my data set for all the different sports. Now what I can do in this source sheet is go into the tooltip, get rid of this extra information, and instead insert a sheet to show my Viz and tooltip. So I'll go down here and select list of title games. We get this markup in the tooltip. And I'll just make the max height and max width a little bit larger. And click OK. And now, as I hover around in this visualization, we filter down that big Viz that we just saw just to the data that we care about. And we have a nice Viz and tooltip showing us that in 2004, there were 2 champions in Boston, the Red Sox and the Patriots. So I'm super excited to see all of the creative things that you guys will do with Viz and tooltip. And this is just one example of things that you can do with it. OK, topic number 3, selection. Selection is going to look very similar to highlighting. We'll bring back the cast of Parks and Rec. And in this case, we'll again select Aziz. But now, instead of him just being highlighted, he's selected so he gets the little black border around him. So you can use selection for a number of different things, and we've already used selection a little bit in Tableau. But I want to point out 4 things that I think are particularly interesting to show off. One is you can use selection to view underlying data. You can use selection to also select other marks that share the same value. This should sound familiar with what we did with highlighting, and I'll compare and contrast the differences with seeing other marks that share the same value. You can use selection to see distances on a map, and also to filter or invoke other actions, which is going to be a lead-in to the next 2 topics. OK, so let's dive back into Tableau. Here's a Viz that has the same information as the first Viz that I showed, which is titles 1 per metro, except instead of it being a bar chart, it's now on a map. So again, if we hover over New York, we can see that that is the largest circle and that New York City has won 49 championships. All right, let's select this mark here. And we see these command buttons up here. The one that I'm going to talk about is this view data one. If we select that, then the first view is the summary data that went into this mark. But we can also look at the full data that backs it. So here we see that this is showing all the fields in our data. We can also unselect this to just see the fields in play on our visualization. And what I love about this view, too, is that you can easily sort on columns and even drag columns around to other places so that you can easily see your underlying data that contributes to that mark. OK, By default, on a map, we're going to show this selection toolbar. So not only can you select things with a rectangular selection tool, but we have these other tools like radial and lasso. So let me select lasso, and I can easily drag this lasso around marks to more precisely grab the marks that I care about. I can even go and use this radial selection tool. I can start in Las Vegas and expand out and see all of the other metros that are close to Las Vegas. For instance, it looks like Portland and Seattle are a little bit closer to Las Vegas than San Antonio and Dallas are. Let me zoom in. I'm going to zoom in down here and zoom in even a little bit more. So now I'm in Southern California, and I'm going to grab that same radial selection tool and start dragging from the center of Los Angeles. And as I drag out, you can see that now we have a numeric readout for the distance of this radial selection tool. You can see that the distance between Los Angeles and Anaheim is about 24 miles. And if I keep dragging out to San Diego, you can see that the distance between LA and San Diego is about 110 miles. So if we have zoomed in far enough, then we'll automatically display this readout because we can be accurate enough about that measurement. And just as a quick note too, we saw that in imperial units, but you can also switch that readout to be in metric units. All right, let's zoom back out. And I'll also just point out here that as you hover around these selection tools, you'll get this tooltip with, in parentheses, it says here A, and then for the radial selection tool, it says S, and for lasso, it says D. These are keyboard shortcuts. So if you want to easily switch between radial and lasso, I can just click D on my keyboard, and now we have the lasso tool to use. And I said by default that on a map, you get these selection tools, and you really don't get them by default on other vizzes, but you can add them in. So this is a viz that's a scatter plot showing titles won and lost per metro. And it might be nice to use a lasso tool, for instance, but there's no affordance. I can add it, though. I can go up to the worksheet menu, show view toolbar, and go to show on hover. And now it shows up, and I can use those tools. OK, let's click a mark here, say Denver. And this feature is new as of 10.3. If I start hovering around in this tooltip, I will see that certain things are underlined. So this is what we call tooltip selection, new as of Tableau 10.3. If I go around here and say, it's interesting that it's been 2 years since Denver last won a title. I wonder what other metros last won a title 2 years ago. I can click this and see that there's another metro that's been selected. Now we have Kansas City selected. And I can go in here and say, it's interesting. Kansas City has won 3 championships total. And if I click on 3, then it'll select another mark here that has won 3 championships. So again, this is very similar to what we were doing with highlighting in the sense that we're starting with a mark and selecting other marks that share similar values. So the big differences are that with the highlighting tool up here, the author is the one deciding which fields they want to base other highlights off of. And you get to choose multiple fields if you want, and we take the intersection of those. So the author decides, and there are multiple fields available, whereas with tooltip selection, you give that option to the end user. They can select different fields, but it's only one at a time. And then finally, I just want to point out that just like with highlighting, if we go to the label button here and show mark labels, we can say that we just want them to show when we selected things. And as I start selecting things, we see the labels for those marks. OK, let's move on to filtering. So the way I think about filtering is that we start with one visualization. In this case, we have a Barack Obama mark, and we have a Zach Galifianakis mark. And we want to filter this down to just the particular mark of interest. So you can use filtering to see some data by itself. This is in contrast to highlighting, where we're looking at particular parts of the data, but it's within the context of other data. Here, we're just looking at the particular data, and everything else is removed. So you can use filtering to reduce cognitive load. Again, instead of throwing everything at the user at once, you can filter down your data and move away from summary statistics closer to the raw data. Filtering is also a great way to enable personalized exploration. So you can have one viz that serves thousands of users, and they can all have their own experiences by filtering that viz in different ways. Now, before we dive into a demo, I just want to point out that there is an order of operations that Tableau executes things in, and filters are a big part of this. Now, generally speaking, if you have filters at the top of this list earlier in the pipeline, then you'll get better performance, very generally speaking. So say you have a filter that is on every sheet, you could instead promote that to, say, a extract filter or a data source filter, the top two listed. And the general rule of thumb is that if you're filtering out at least 10% of the data, then you'll probably wind up with better performance throughout your workbook. And we'll take a look at how you can do that in Tableau. So we'll touch on performance, we'll touch on a few different types of filters, and we'll look at how you can use fixed axes with filtering. OK, this visualization is not very interesting. There's just a mark for every row in my data sets. And I know it's a little bit tough to see, but down here in the left-hand corner, we can see that we have 7,194 marks in this viz. And that should match the number of rows. So just to confirm that, I'll drag out number of records onto the viz. And yes, we do have a mark for every row in the data set. OK, let's start filtering this view down. I'm going to filter it by metro choice. So I'll show a filter here. And I'll go in here and switch this filter to be a multi-value dropdown. So as I go in here, I can start selecting different items, and the viz will update accordingly every time I select something. But maybe I know exactly what set I want to select on, and maybe I have a data set that's huge. So every time I switch a filter item, Tableau needs to execute that query and then redo the viz, and that can take a while in certain cases. So instead, I can come in here and customize my filter. In this drop-down menu here, I can customize it to show an apply button. So now, as I go in here and start selecting items, nothing changes until I decide to select apply right here at the bottom. And once I do, the viz updates all in one shot. So again, instead of doing incremental queries and viz updates, we've kind of batched this all into one update, which can be more performant. All right, let me go back in here and customize it to not show the apply button anymore. And we'll go back to showing all of the values. Now, I can do something very similar with an icon that I think most people don't know too much about. And that's this one up here that has a database icon and a pause button. So what this is going to do is it's going to pause auto update. It's going to pause the viz. So if I click it, you'll see that the pause icon turns into a play icon. So now we're in pause mode. And if I go back over here and start switching the filter around, you can see that the visualization has faded out and it's not updating. But as soon as I go up here and press the play button, the viz updates. So again, batching all of our operations into one go. OK, we have now filtered our data source down to just Boston and Chicago. And say those are the only two metros I really care about for my analysis. I could take this filter and promote it to be a data source filter. So if I go in here, I can say that this filter should apply to worksheets all using this data source. And now it gets this database icon, and it is a data source filter. We can see that that's true by going to the data menu, looking at that data source, and looking at its data source filters. And we can see that we have metro choice that keeps Boston and Chicago. So again, this is filtering out everything earlier on in the order of operations so that all subsequent operations are using less data and therefore can be more performant. All right, let's go back and change that to not be a global filter. And let's talk about another filtering item. on this other sheet here. So again, we're back to titles 1 per metro. But now I want to look at the, say, top 10 metros per sport. So I want to filter down and see, say, for hockey, what are the top 10 metros that have won championships? So I'll need some filters in play. So let me go here and grab sports and show a filter there. And we'll make this a single value list and show all of them. So we're back to where we began. And now I'll, again, throw metro choice onto the filter shelf. And I'm going to go to this top tab and select by field to show the top 10 that have won championships. I'll click OK. And now we filter the viz down to just show the top 10. So now I should just be able to go into this filter for sport and switch to, say, baseball and see the top 10 in baseball. So watch closely as to what happens in this visualization. So we went from having 10 items here to just 9 items here. And somehow Toronto's included, even though they've only won 2 championships. So something's a bit off here. Let's head back to the slides and go back to that order of operations slide. So what's happening here is that we have a top 10 filter in play and a dimension filter for sport. And those are the 4th and 5th items listed up there. But what's happening is that the order of operations says that we're going to first filter by the top 10 and then filter by sport. When really we want to filter by sport first and then look at the top 10 within that sport. So ideally, we'd like this dimension filter to come before this top n filter. So we could promote this dimension filter to, say, be a context filter, which is 3rd on the list and happens before the top n filter takes place. So let's see how we can do that. Back here, let's grab this sport filter and instead add it to context. And watch what happens in the viz as I click this. Now all of a sudden, we have said that we were going to first filter by sport and then look at the top 10 within that sport. And now we have 10 items in this visualization. And Toronto, which is not a top 10 baseball title metro, is no longer on here. And as we switch between the sports, we can see that we always have 10 listed, and those are the top 10 metros per sport. OK. 2 other quick filtering examples. One is that we can have numeric filters. So we have this numeric filter on year. I'm going to narrow this down to just the last 20 years. And we can see that Boston has won the most championships in the last 10 years, or last 20 years, sorry. So 10 championships in the last 20 years. So I can go in here and start selecting these handles and move them around. But I can also go in between the handles and select this bar and drag this bar around and preserve the fact that my range is always 20 years. One more quick tip. If I go here, I can see that this visualization is showing us that New York City has won 31% of the baseball titles. And if I switch the metro from, say, New York City to Oakland, the viz updates to show 4%, but the bar didn't really change, which isn't as visually appealing as we may want it to be. So what's happening here is that by default, when we filter, we're also adjusting the axis to show the full extent of the data. But in this case, I don't want to do that. I want to see that bar move. So let me go in here, double-click this quantitative axis, and instead of having this range automatically update, I want to fix it to be from 0 to, say, a little greater than 100%. I'll click OK. And now, as I switch between metros, I can nicely see this bar switch widths. OK, actions. So actions in Tableau are basically set up as when a user interacts with the visualization, something else can happen. And we call this an action. When a user interacts with the visualization, an action can happen. And there are 3 types of actions in Tableau. We have filter actions, highlight actions, and URL actions. So we just looked at filtering, so let's look at what a filter action might be in Tableau. We have a very similar visualization as before, except now it's a dashboard. We have one visualization at the top and a second visualization below. And as I select a bar in the top visualization, we filter down the bottom visualization. OK, so you can use actions to filter and highlight data while interacting with the visualization. You can also use actions to connect different views together and to incorporate external content via URL actions. And I'll show a few examples of that. So again, the 3 main types of actions: filter actions, highlight actions, and URL actions. So let's jump into Tableau again. OK, this visualization should look somewhat familiar. We have the map as we did before. And now we've broken down our titles by sport, and each sport gets its own tree map. So now as I select something in this top viz, I'd like to see the other viz's update. But nothing has happened yet. So we need to set up a filter action. One way to do that is by going to this filter icon here and clicking it. And now we're using this visualization to filter all the other visualizations in this dashboard. If I select New York City, then you can see that the title count has been filtered down to just 49 titles, and the tree maps have been filtered down to just show New York City. I could do the same, say, for Oakland. And we can see that Oakland has 1 title in all sports except for hockey. So what's actually happening here? If we go up to the dashboard menu and look at actions, we can see that this filter action was automatically generated for us when we clicked on that filter icon. If we look at the details of it, we can see that the source sheet is going to be this map. And then if we select something in this map, it's going to filter down all of the target sheets in our visualization. OK. Let's remove that for now and look at a highlight action. So I'm going to do something very similar, set up a highlight action. And I'll say that we're going to highlight from all of these visualizations to all of these visualizations. So I have a lot of highlighting throughout this viz. I'll click OK. OK. And now if I select New York, I should see highlighting. But actually, in this case, I don't. I see a lot of these other marks being dimmed out, but I don't see any highlighting happening. And so actually, we need to fix this highlight action. If we go back up here to the dashboard menu and look at the actions dialog, we said that we wanted to highlight all of the fields. But actually, that's giving us wrong results. We actually just want to highlight on one particular field. So we'll go to selected fields and say we just want to highlight based on the metro choice. Once we do that, now when we select this item in the map, we get the New York City marks highlighted in the subsequent vizes. But we still have title count at 363, and so maybe we want to combine highlight actions and filter actions in the same visualization. So let's go back up here and set up a filter action. So we'll start from all of these different visualizations and target just the title count. And we'll run that on select and click OK. So now as we select New York City, we can see that we've set up a highlight action to highlight the bottom vizes, and we set up a filter action to filter to the appropriate title count. OK, let's look at URL actions. So URL actions allow you to incorporate external content. So 2 examples that I'll show off here. If I select New York City, now I have these 2 extra links down here. One is to check out more information about this metro on Wikipedia, and another is to email maybe a colleague about this interesting information that I'm seeing in this viz. So let's see how those work. If I select this first URL action, I'll get taken to a web page that shows sports in New York City. And if I select this second item, I will be taken to a new email that was auto-populated with information about this mark that I can instantly send to a coworker. So the trick behind all of this, if we check out what actions are in place on this dashboard, is that we have this URL that isn't stagnant. It's not a static URL. It has this field in it that is dynamic. So based on the mark that I'm choosing, we'll substitute in the appropriate metro choice. Likewise, for the URL to mail a colleague, we've set it up with this protocol called mail to. And within here, we have our coworker, we have a subject line, and we have a body as well. And again, we have fields within here so that based on the mark that you select, we can auto-populate an email with that information. So an easy way to take information from Tableau and either email a colleague or go to a web page or see some more information outside of Tableau. Okay, let's segue from actions and see how they can be important in dashboard navigation. So an example of dashboard navigation is that we start with maybe one visualization, asking which celebrity do you want to see next. And when we've selected Ellen, we're taken to Ellen with Michelle Obama. Okay, so navigation is primarily used as a way to guide users through their exploration. Instead of just showing a bunch of vizzes in your workbook, you can provide a nice guide to flow between visualizations. So 2 techniques I'll show are jumping to other sheets and how to use hidden visualizations. And I won't go through all the details, and that's why I have links here so that you can look at more of the details when you get these slides after the conference. But I'll show you the basics of both of those things. So we're going to start here with this dashboard. And this dashboard has a visualization set up at the top that shows the championship success rate. So this is looking at how many championships has a Metro won versus how many seasons have they participated in a sport for. So you can see that Montreal, of all the times that they've been a participant in a sports season, they've won the championship 17% of the time. And so from here, you may want to guide users to another visualization. I have these questions down here. And if I select one of these questions, like which metros have won the most consecutive titles, it'll jump me to an entirely new dashboard that answers that question. So we can see here that Montreal has also had a streak of winning 9 consecutive titles. And so maybe from here, I wonder, well, which metros have lost the most consecutive titles? And I can select that and be taken to a different dashboard to see that information, and so on and so forth. And so what we're really doing here is using filter actions to jump between sheets. So in the previous example with filter actions, we were on one dashboard and we were filtering from a source sheet on that dashboard to other target sheets on that dashboard. But we could filter from one sheet to an entirely different sheet. And when we do that, we'll actually jump to that other sheet. And so what we're doing here is we're taking advantage of the fact that we can jump from sheet to sheet. And when we set up the filter action, instead of filtering on a field, we're saying we're just not going to filter on any fields at all. So essentially, we're just using this as a way to jump from sheet to sheet. OK, let's take a look at hidden visualizations. OK, I had this visualization set up that's taking up the entire height of my dashboard. And it looks like that's all the information that we have here. But if I start selecting something in this word cloud, say Oakland, then we see this visualization pop up into view. I can select something else, like Toronto, And again, we've accommodated the height of this dashboard to fit this visualization. So what's going on here? Normally, by default, we would see something like this, where you do have a top dashboard and you can select items, but this bottom visualization is taking up all of the screen real estate, even when we've selected nothing on top. So the first thing that's happening here, and I'll switch over to this view, is that if we look at the filter action in play, we've said that we want to exclude all values when we've cleared the selection. So when we've cleared the selection on the top viz, we want to exclude all values in that bottom viz. Instead of showing all values or leaving the filter, we want to exclude all values. That's why there are no marks in that bottom viz. But we can combine that with a layout that allows us to then hide that visualization by default if there are no marks selected, or no marks present. So if I go here to the Layout tab, I can see how I've laid out this dashboard. And you can see that I actually have a vertical layout that houses both the word cloud visualization and the titles by franchise visualization. And what this vertical layout does is basically expands out to fit the space. So when I don't have any marks present in that bottom viz because we've excluded all the marks, the vertical layout says, okay, the word cloud visualization can take up the entire vertical space. And so this works for vertical layouts as well as horizontal layouts. Okay, parameters. So the way I like to think about parameters is you can start with one thing, and you can dramatically change that one thing. So we can start with a Justin Bieber that's young and make him into an older Justin Bieber, and then transform him into a tattooed Justin Bieber. So you can use parameters to make your content more dynamic, just like we did with Bieber there. You can use it to further customize user experiences, and honestly, you can use it to perform magic. There are so many cool things that you can do with parameters in Tableau. And I won't go into the details about them, but I'll have a slide at the end here with some really inspiring examples that you can check out on your own. 3 quick examples that I like to show are how to have dynamic fields, dynamic filters, and dynamic colors. So let's go back to Tableau here. So now we're showing a very similar viz that we've shown before. This is the titles 1, but now we have filtered it down to just the titles 1 in the last 30 years, and just for metros that have won sports, or have won championships in at least 3 distinct sports. So all along, we've been using this Metro Choice pill. And it seems like it may just be a column in our original data source, but actually it's being driven by a parameter. So let's go down here and take a look at our parameters in play. And we have this Metro definition. We have a Metro and then an extended Metro. So going back to the very beginning of the talk, for Metro, I've said that San Francisco and Oakland are going to be separate. And for the extended Metro, I'm going to say, no, those 2 actually comprise the Bay Area. So let's see what happens. If I have this parameter, and I show the parameter control, which is over here, and I set up my field such that if my parameter is Metro, I'm going to display the Metro field in my data. Otherwise, I'm going to display the expanded Metro field in my data. Then as soon as I switch this dropdown from Metro to extended Metro, the viz is going to change pretty dramatically. Let's see what happens. So instead of there being 5 items with Chicago and Boston in the lead, we instead have LA and New York City and this new entry for the Bay Area. So what's happening here is I've switched my definition. The Bay Area is now San Francisco plus Oakland. Los Angeles includes Anaheim, New York City includes New Jersey titles, and so I've been able to dramatically update my visualization just with this parameter. Let's look at another example. back to our top 10 filter by sport. I can say that, well, I want to provide the choice to the user to specify a value besides 10. So if I go in here and look at the Metro Choice filter, we can see that we have the top 10. But maybe I want to switch this, not just from 10, but to parameterize this value. So let's choose a parameter that we've already set up, this top N Metro Choice. Click OK. And now we can see that the viz has changed. Let's go down here and show this parameter control. And we can see that it's set to 1. So we're showing the top 1 metros for this sport. I can go in here and provide this as a control to my end user so that they can decide how many top N they want to see and dynamically update the viz accordingly. And then one other cute example. Right here we have a visualization where all of the bars are blue, but maybe we want to provide an affordance to our users to color code the bars as they choose. We can grab this bar color parameter, throw it onto the color shelf, and then show this parameter control to allow the end user to switch between green and red and blue. And essentially what's happening here is that we just have a parameter where we have a bunch of string values, and then we've gone in here and mapped those string values to the corresponding color. So again, a way to dynamically update your visualization. OK, so I promised a bunch of links. Feel free to take a look at these when you get the slides. There are so many amazing things that you can do with parameters, even as much as to make games within Tableau exclusively. So you can make Battleship, you can make Monopoly. These are really, really cool things that go into a lot of details with parameters. But essentially, parameters are magic. OK, instant analytics, the second to last topic. An example of instant analytics is, say you have a visualization with 4 presidents that have an average year in office of 5 years. But if you select one of them, then you can see how that average updates. So Reagan was in office for 8 years. So instant analytics allow you to quickly see some analytics for your data, and then easily compare analytics of some of your data to all of your data. And I'll show one quick example with instant lines. So this visualization is showing the cumulative championships for 3 different metros, Boston, Chicago, and New York City. And I can go up here to this Analytics tab and drag in this trend line, and then go here and take decade. Oh, it's already here. And we'll show the highlighter for decade. So now I'm using the highlighter that we already talked about with these instant analytics, so that as I highlight one of these decades, we can see that the viz automatically updates to show me the new trend lines just scoped to the 1990s. So you can see that in the 1990s, while New York and Chicago were winning a lot of championships, Boston was very stagnant. They didn't win any. Or if we switch to the current decade, we can see that Boston and Chicago are doing very well, but New York is the one that's a little bit flat. OK, one final word about the JavaScript API. So the JavaScript API is designed for developers that code in JavaScript, and this allows you to have more flexibility with some of the things that I already mentioned, like with selection and filtering. So essentially, you can invoke these different selection and filtering actions without a user interacting with the visualization themselves, and you can also listen to interaction events in the visualization. So again, this is a way to add extra customization using JavaScript. OK, I think we went through 26 different Tableau topics and saw 26 different celebrities. So let me quickly recap what we saw. If you want to provide some ways to explore the data, especially for someone who's just starting out with their analysis, highlighting and legends and tooltips are great ways to explore the data. Your bread and butter is going to be selection, filtering, and instant analytics. These are going to come up all the time. For dynamic content, actions and parameters are really good tools. We didn't talk about pages, but that's another way to really show dynamic content in your visualization. If you want to connect views together, then dashboard navigation is great. Actions, like we saw, can connect views together. And then tooltips with the Viz and Tooltip feature can connect different visualizations together. I didn't mention stories, but stories is also a great way to connect different views with each other. And then finally, if you really want to customize your visualization, providing filtering affordances, diving into parameters, and even using the JavaScript API is a great way to customize. And with that, I just want to have a quick reminder that feel free to fill out the survey to give me feedback on the session. And I will wrap it up there. And I think we have just a few minutes for Q&A. So thank you very much.